Hey YouTube, been a long time since I've put a video up, so wanted to do a quick channel update, but also more importantly kind of answer the question that, it's a rhetorical question. If you've been prepping for a while, you already know the answer, but for people who may have just started, or else any of you out there who kind of feel like you'll never be prepared, the question is, when do you know you are prepared? And the, real simple answer is hopefully you never feel completely fully prepared, because I think if you do, you become complacent. So for most of us, when we don't have unlimited resources to just, go out and buy, 3 years worth of canned food in one shot and, move someplace, that's just completely isolated from the rest of the world. Most of us have to kind of live within the world that we live in. We have jobs, families, and so preparedness is a journey. It's not really a destination. And kind of what I've found over the years is, you have preparedness victories here and there where you feel like you got something done, but I don't think I'm ever going to feel like I'm fully prepared. When the apocalypse comes, I'm always going to think that there was something more that I should have been able to get accomplished, and that's probably very true. But I kind of look towards the small victories that I can do, and trying to reach my goals in particular aspects of preparedness. So one small victory here is I have been able to put up my wood for the winter. So I've got about 4 cords of wood here, which is enough to last me through the winter. And I've got some tree work that I'm going to be getting done this fall, which is very likely to provide me with another year's worth of firewood, hardwood. So when you're kind of looking at preparedness in terms of the basics, food, water, shelter, this goes a long way towards shelter. I've got 2 wood stoves in the house, and God forbid, if need be, we would be okay as long as I've got enough wood to burn. So that's perhaps a minor victory, but to me, I feel a lot better about this winter now than I did before. And when those other trees come down and I know that I've got enough to last, for 2 years, my goal would be to try to always have 2 years worth of firewood stored up. So, if we do end up getting a long-term grid outage, I at least know that I've got the heat part of the shelter covered. There are many other things we have to think about. So food, water, shelter. But also location. So you may not recognize this from my last videos. My last videos were all shot in Connecticut, where I used to live. Since that time, I've ended up moving to a fairly remote area of New Hampshire. And every time I've moved, in recent years, I've always kind of thought about the preparedness aspect of where I was living, of where I was moving to. And, is it an area that, would be safe, away from nuclear power plants, away from big population centers. Preferably, a town that doesn't have major highways going through it if you can. And you don't always have a whole lot of choice about where you live, but, when you do, I ended up with an opportunity to move for my job. And I think out of all the places I've ever lived, this is the place from a preparedness standpoint that I like the best. Just because it's remote, it's off the beaten path. It's a town that does not have any major highways and only one minor state road running through it. So in terms of lots of refugees coming from, urban centers, if we got a long-term grid outage, we're way off the beaten path. So that's a great aspect of this. So location, when you have a choice, is something to always think about. And most people, move at some time in their career or some time in their life. And that's one thing that you want to bear in mind is when you're looking for the next place that you're going to live. If, you get a promotion or you change jobs or, you've got the opportunity to move, you want to kind of think about the location. That's something that you can't do later. So if nothing else, what one of my preparedness goals is to not have to bug out, to be able to stay put where I am, and for my family and I to be relatively safe and relatively secure to the extent possible. You never know what's going to happen. You always have to be prepared to get out of Dodge if you have to. But I live at a high enough elevation. I don't have to worry about floods. As I said, far away from the closest nuclear plant or, potential environmental disaster that I can think of, to the extent that we know where those all are. So in terms of location, that's an important preparedness aspect that you really can't go back and change. If you're already in your house, you can't change where that's located. You can only do the best you can with what you have. And I've always tried to do that. The last place we lived in Connecticut was not off the beaten path, but it was in kind of a remote location in the particular town I was in. And also, there were a lot of advantages to that particular place. I had lots of room to garden. It was fairly isolated, but, things happen. You move, my job changed, so I was able to, move to a place that I really like in terms of location. Food, water, shelter. So if you're trying to prepare to stay where you are, for the most part, if you possibly can, then those are things that you want to look at. I'm never going to feel like I'm fully there, but I've at least been able to make some gains towards food, water, and shelter security since I've been here, and I'm just going to continue to work towards that. Those are the main ones, and then there's also security. So that's a whole nother aspect for another video. But location has a lot to do with security. If you live in a suburban area right outside of a big city, it's a consideration that you have to have. Where are all those people in the big city going to go when it becomes untenable to stay there? When there's no more food, there's no more city water, city sewer, there's no more law and order. Those people are going to flee, and they're going to flee right through first the suburban neighborhoods and then out into the rural places. So you have to think about where you are and then what you need to do in terms of security. And there may be some places, a lot of you may live in a place where really you're not going to have a whole lot of good options when it comes to staying where you are, especially if you are in an urban area or some suburban areas that are kind of right on the beaten path where everybody's going to go. If the grid goes down long term, and by long term, you don't have to be talking 10 years. If you look at what happened in Hurricane Andrew and Hurricane Katrina, law and order evaporates very, very quickly in the absence of power. We know this. And so, even if you're talking about, kind of a short term and, more local type of disaster, you still got to think about the law and order aspect. Are you going to be secure where you are? So in terms of shelter, I'm in a good situation where, I do have wood stoves. I do have, now enough fuel to get me through this winter, and hopefully soon, if the apocalypse doesn't come before I have a bunch of trees taken down, I'm going to have 2 years worth of firewood sitting here. So now, what about water? Depending on what you have, if you've got city water, you've got to figure that's going to end at some point. It's either going to end or it's going to become contaminated. So you have to prepare for that. You have to think about where are your water sources. What can you do about water storage? If you have city water, you want to think about being able to store and preserve some water long enough that you'd be able to survive on what you've got for a while. I'm out in a very, very rural area. We have a well, and the well obviously runs off of electricity. Now, my primary backup plan for that right now is I have a generator, and I run the well pump off of the generator if need be. And even with a small amount of gas, being careful, I could do that for a period of time, depending on how much gas I have and how conservative I am about using the generator. But that's one initial water plan. Another thing to think about if you have a well is having a secondary means of getting water out of it. And so, for example, a baler bucket. And if you're don't know what that is, baler bucket it's kind of like a long tube, can be made out of PVC or metal, and it's got a one-way valve on the bottom, and you just basically lower it into the well. It's a long, thin tube. If you go up on YouTube, there's lots of videos. Southern Prepper One did one a while back on baler buckets, which is a great explanation of how they work and why it's important to have. They're not very expensive. You can buy one for probably about $60, and you can also make them yourself. All you need is some PVC piping and the one-way valve and some rope, and essentially you could make one yourself if you wanted, or you can buy one. So that's a good secondary means. Ultimately, what my goal is, and I don't know when I'm going to be able to achieve this because don't have unlimited resources in terms of money. But one of the things down the road I want to do is I want to have a small off-grid solar power system that's just robust enough to be able to run my well pump and the LED lights on my aquaponics garden and the aquaponics pump. So I'm not really looking for it to do anything more than that right now. But if it can run my well pump and my aquaponics system, then that goes a long way towards food and water security. So, aquaponics. Okay, well, back if you saw my old videos, from the last couple years, I do a lot of gardening. Where I am right now, I still can garden and I still plan on doing that, but I'm in a colder climate zone than I used to be. So, the gardening is a little bit limited up here in New Hampshire. Your season is limited. You can still, do quite a bit of gardening, and you can do canning and, do a lot towards food security with an outside garden. But one of the things that I have been able to accomplish is a indoor aquaponics system. So I have one system completely up and running right now, and I have a second system that I'm in the process of cycling. It's just been completely built, just cycling it. In another probably week or so, I'll be able to start some plants, and then as soon as the nitrite level goes down, I'm going to be able to start adding fish. And where I am, my basement, I ran temperature readings all winter long, and my basement never gets below 52 degrees, I noticed. Even on the coldest days, it could be in the single digits outside, and my basement was, the coldest I ever saw it get was 52 degrees. And in the summer, the hottest I've seen it get is about 74 degrees. So that's perfect for certain types of aquaponic fish, such as rainbow trout, koi and goldfish as well. And there's lots of plants that you can grow. Even in the dead of winter, I was pulling green beans off. I had broccoli. I had lots of lettuce. I'm pulling lots of lettuce off. Your leafy greens tend to do very well in the colder weather. And then in the warmer weather, when the temperature goes up a little bit in the basement, I've been growing peppers, eggplants, squash, all kinds of things down there. So in the upcoming update to my book, which should be out in September, civil defense book, it's going to actually be called the second edition of Prepping for a Suburban or Rural Community. This edition actually has a brief chapter on aquaponics, and some ideas of what you can do to increase your food security, and especially if you live in an area of the country where you don't have a growing season all year round. I mean, if you live down south, you may be able to actually grow food all year round where you are. But, you know, up here, your gardening season is kind of limited to, you know, a couple months in the spring, summer, and fall. And in the winter, there's not much you can do in terms of gardening. But an indoor aquaponics system is a year-round food security, and is something that, you know, you can very, very seriously consider no matter where you live. I think aquaponics is a great addition to your food preps. So I'm probably going to shut this off for now, but just wanted to do just a quick update. I'm still here. I'm still prepping. Just moved and, you know, starting anew from another area. Some of you all may remember Khan. He's been featured in a previous video. There he is. Hey, Khan. There you go. He's still with us, and we're still moving forward with just trying to be prepared for whatever the future brings. Thanks for watching.